Welcome to the 8th podcast of the Wake Up Laughing podcast. I'm David Munson. I am the author of the upcoming book, Wake Up Laughing, Help for Anxiety and Depression. And I would love to send you to my website, davidcmunson.com, where you can find out everything you need to know about being healthy and happy in the 21st century on planet Earth. And I am honored to have with me today Roger Anunsen, who, oh my goodness. So the bio is on my computer. So I was going to read it off of the computer because we were going to do the phone, but I can actually bring it up on my phone. All right, watch this. We're on the fly here. So I've been doing radio for 11 years and it's always been on the fly. And that's how I've always done it. And so here's a little fly. And
wait a minute. Make sure you don't go too long because you and I only have so much time and I'm excited. So read whatever amount you want.
okay.
This is going to be a good one.
Yeah, this is all good. It won't take but a second. Roger Anunsen is a brain health educator, consultant, and cognitive intervention coach who has been applying brain science breakthroughs to real-life challenges faced by older adults for over 2 decades. That's something that we have in common, Roger, is that you are looking at science and practices and you're saying, how do we apply these to the daily routines and lifestyle? That's what I'm all about, is what can you do? You know, Ken Kesey always used to say, what are you doing? Like, that was his thing. It's like, okay, you've got great thoughts, you've got great philosophies, you've read all these things, you've wrote what are you doing? And I thought that was good. You know, when you're involved in the revolution, change isn't made solely by good thoughts, it's by good deeds. So here I go. Have you ever had someone read your bio to you before?
Not yet.
Right.
Go ahead.
I'm full of interjections. I'm gonna interject, folks. You are lucky. This guy, Roger Anunsen, here is a lovable guy. I've watched both of his TED Talks. I heard him on the radio by chance. And that's a whole other podcast. What is it that makes somebody lovable? Because that's a really fun topic right there. Anyway, after a 26-year career as a public defender and private practice attorney, Roger found a new passion working to promote brain health among older adults. While working at an assisted living community in 2001, Roger invented Memorobics, a first of its kind cognitive intervention program that was soon the subject of a clinical trial. You know, I'm gonna pause there because I could keep going with that. Oh, and I'm gonna hit my timer, which I forgot to do. Boom. So we're yeah. I'm gonna pause with that and just throw out there the reason that Roger is with us today is that I have I have 23 chapters in my book, and one of them is Think Happy. And so we are looking at the overlap between Roger's world, working mostly with seniors, and teaching people how to use tools to get oxytocin into their bloodstream, practices. And I'm doing the same thing, though my focus is more on youth, since they're the future of the world, and I feel the hardest hit from COVID and everything. And we're going to we'll be spending time in the areas where we overlap today. And yeah, and so I love, for starters, Roger, I know you have a lot to say, but I want to make a toast to thinking happy, having good thoughts and good feelings, and being of service to fellow men, all these things that come together to create a healthy, happy human being. And I want to start the interview to help people get a sense of your nature by, you've talked about when you smell the icing on a gingerbread cookie cooking in the oven, that it releases happy chemicals connected with your memories of grandma's cookies and the love you felt in her kitchen. And it's vast, it smells, sight. And I talk about in my book how one of my most powerful, I call it a warm fuzzy, one of my most powerful happy memories. If I'm laying in bed riddled with anxiety, I should just get out of bed and go for a walk, but if I sit there in bed and I want to play with my mental state, I'll pretend I'm going to my grandma's to deliver firewood to her, because it's a road trip. I'm doing something to help someone. I love my grandma, and the memories of being at grandma's house are always fantastic and rich. So Roger Anunsen, the star of two TED Talks, one called Neuroplasticity and the other, I believe, called Brain Health Strategies, two amazing TED Talks. What is Roger's warm fuzzy?
It's the ability to understand your brain before you apply it. And during our memorobics, instead of having a passive group of people in assisted living doing what I'll call mindless but important exercises called sit and be fit, I realized that they were sitting and they were helping their bodies, but they weren't thinking. They looked not only sad, but I could see a cognitive decline. So I interrupted the ending as they were ready to leave. And I said, just a minute, play with me, repeat after me. And Dave, you don't know that we're going to do this, but picture yourself with this activity director who had just been upgraded from a part-time van driver to the activity director on a Friday afternoon when the activity director walked out. And I told Michelle, I don't have any training. And she said, no problem. The trainer will be here on Monday. And on Monday, I took the job and moved from $7.50 to $8 an hour, but I loved what I was doing. And on Monday, I got trained by the corporate trainer who came down from Portland. And he said, just follow the 3 B's: Bibles, birthdays, and bingo. So when you ask, what's the magic of it? It's to stimulate your brain, to be surprised by something.
But hold on, my question is, I'm trying to get personal here. What is Roger Anunsen's most powerful warm fuzzy? If you want to grab onto something from your past that warms your heart and gives you that squirt of happy chemicals, and then I want to get in there. I want to get into what you did with those people, because that ties in with my book many ways. But I want to hear who Roger Anunsen is a little bit before we get too into the teachings.
So what is my number one neuro squirt?
Yeah.
My number one neuro squirt would be to take a fresh strawberry that I picked on a warm morning, so it's not afternoon hot, and I would eat it from the field, in the field, shut my eyes, and would take me back to time after time that I was on a berry platoon, thoroughly loved being in the strawberries. And you don't get that unless you go out and search for it. So I can go out every spring, summer in Oregon, and I can pick a fresh strawberry, shut my eyes, and I'm back in time. It's a moment in time that I can capture because I intentionally stimulated my brain.
I love it. I love it. It's the magic pill, that little strawberry. And smell, texture, it's everything. Well, that's cool. I like that. That's one of my dreams, is I'm dreaming about my old man garden, my grandpa garden, and the berries. My grandpa grew strawberries. He had a strawberry patch. His grandchildren and great grandchildren would come out there, and you can count on little kids to pick ripe berries. And weeding, maybe not so much, but little kids will go out there and gobble down berries. It's in their nature. So that's cool. That's your warm fuzzy. Are you able to, physically eating the berries? Awesome. But can you do a dry run of that in your mind? Can you pretend?
Sure. Yeah, there's There's two ways to do that, and think about that. And in your book, the chapter that I'm really attracted to that you mentioned, you talk about early morning when you wake up and you're a little bit groggy. Instead of just jumping out of bed, as you said earlier, and doing something, my recommendations are to lay in bed and realize that your brain doesn't have a lot of blood flow during the night. You're horizontal. Take a deep breath, get some oxygen with glucose and with oxygen into your brain, and think. But don't just think about anything. Intentionally apply the science that says that when you take that deep breath by exhaling, inhaling, as big as you can get, and then hold it for about 4 seconds and then exhale, your brain will then attach itself after that 1 10-second activity. And you're going to be able then to think about something you're going to do that is positive that day. I call it not a gotta do. You got a lot of gotta do's. It's a get to do. It's what you get to do. And if you look forward to that and have a goal of that day, looking forward to doing that, that's going to raise that happiness just a smidgen. Now, if you don't have one, Dave, lay in bed until you think of one. I'm going to go do something today to help somebody. You're going to go get that strawberry. You're going to do something. And that's intentionally applying the science that says when Roger thinks about something he's going to do, he's creating a goal that if he does follow through, and as Nike says, just do it, your brain gets healthier.
Yeah. So what a great habit. Start every day by thinking about the thing that you're excited about. And I'm going to be transparent. I'm going to admit that recently I have been wrestling with negative thoughts, people that I'm mad at, people that did something wrong to me. And it just keeps popping in my head. And I'm like, God, I'm tired of it. It's easy to grab onto that. But so I thought, okay, what's a positive thing? I'm picturing my book completed in my hand. I'm picturing the house that I'm going to buy from the proceeds from the book, living in this house. Today's my birthday. Thank you. I'm on my birthday, after this magnificent interview where I'm spending time with a person who I respect so much, I'm going to go soak at the well springs, at the hot springs in town. I'm going to be with beautiful people sharing from the heart in healing mineral waters. After that, I'm going to go hang out with my ping pong buddies, and we're going to make jokes and kid each other while playing ping pong and exercising our eye-hand coordination while waving at people driving by on the street, a public spectacle. After that, I'm going to go have dinner with my son and my best friend and celebrate how fortunate we are to be able to go to a restaurant and sit together and enjoy each other's presence. After that, I'm going to go get a Chinese massage and have my entire body, all of my meridians and my chakras aligned and good. So that's like 5 winning things in one day, plus calls. And so maybe every day could be our birthday.
You're giving yourself presence by even thinking about it. Releases what I said in that TED talk called the power of a smidgen. It's a smidgen of a neuro squirt by you thinking about it. And then when you're doing it, you're reinforcing that. So it's not spending time on your birthday. You're giving yourself by investing. Because remember, you can waste time, you can spend time, or you can invest it. And the most valuable thing you have in life is time, and you control what you do with it. There are a lot of gotta do's, but if you can get more get to do's, things you look forward to, and even if you don't fill up all those birthday gifts you're giving yourself, just having a few of those in your windshield that you're looking forward to as you travel through the day, that's brain healthy.
So yeah, having more get to do's and not so many have to do's. That was the central lesson I got from my first therapist, my first psychotherapist when I was 21. I had a full-blown mental nervous breakdown at UCLA, came home, took 6 months of baby steps to come back. And the gold nugget out of that whole like 6 months or a year of therapy with a really amazing man, the nugget was, I had too many have to do's in my life and I needed more wanna do's. And this ties in directly with, it's such, the process of writing a book and doing a podcast is so magical, and the messages reveal themselves. Like, I have my thoughts, I have my experiences, I share them in my book, but then there's a whole other layer that just reveals itself through the interactions with people like yourself. But I'm interviewing this 20-year-old boy named Zephyr, and his central message was, he went to this junior high, he went to a K-8 school that really supported him. It was like a village, and they spent a lot of time in nature, and he was the happiest kid. He played music, he hiked and camped. His teachers really were present for him. And when he went to high school, he crashed. It didn't work. He went from the small village school to the high school. And his first 2 years in high school, he became lonely and depressed, and it was horrible. And what he revealed in that interview is like a central message for my whole book that I didn't even know was coming. And that central message is, you have to self-actualize. As a human, you have to become your own boss. You have to decide what is necessary for your happiness, and you can't look to your parents for it. You can't look to the school for it. You can't look to your employer for it. It all has to come from inside. So what this boy did is he decided that what he needed to do to be happy was to be in nature. So his grades suffered, but he was out in the forest with his buddies, and they were camping, and you know, frowned upon by polite society, but he was happy. He was being Zephyr. And that to me is one of the core things. And that was why I had a nervous breakdown. I was not feeding the soul of Dave Munson. I was becoming an engineering student in a busy city that was founded on materialism. I was not being Dave Munson. So that, yeah.
Hey, both you and Zephyr were listening to your bodies when you weren't listening to what was making you happy, it made you sick. And I don't know what type of biomarkers he or you had as you were nosediving into whatever lower happiness state you were in. But by recognizing that you weren't happy and doing something about it, instead of saying, I don't control my future, you made that turn at a young age. And it serves you well to have that happen. But to have two stories like that is really a nice start to your life, to say, I can see that in others. Happy outside, and you were not happy as an engineer student heading in a certain direction.
Well,
That's
yeah.
terrific.
And there's two ways to look at that. You can do the cup is half full or the cup is half empty. And that's one of my statements, is like, train yourself to always see the cup as half full. So the
And
cup,
when you use that cup half full and you focus on it, it's full of good things. And that's where you want to make sure you take those sips of the good things that are there, and not have this half empty be those have to do on a list. Do you really have to do all of those? Go ahead and do a few of those that you know you can get done, but save time every single day for those things you really fill yourself. And in brain science, it's the flood of positive chemicals that isn't just on a Wednesday or a Saturday, but it's a little bit every single day that you reward yourself by getting the chemicals that don't have to be through a pill. They're inside your brain, inside the blood-brain barrier. They're like faucets. And what you told me a few minutes ago about the things you're going to do on your birthday, those are going to have chemicals that are in faucets waiting for you to turn them on. So here's your ping pong faucet with your buddies. Here's the one with your family. Here's the one by eating one bite of something you've been looking forward to. those are the combinations of neurochemicals that I call a neurochemical cascade that you can control. But when that's coming out, you make sure you invest the time to savor them, and you'll be healthier for it.
Yes. Yeah. Yeah, today I'm just gonna stand like a beautiful person in Hawaii under the waterfall um of love and support and playfulness and transparency and open-hearted. Yeah, just cascading. I want to make a point of the cup half full, cup half empty. The way to look at the story of Dave and Zephyr as cup half full is to say, aren't we fortunate that we went through that transformation at the age of 16 for Zephyr, at the age of 21 for Dave? Because when you're in that in that honored elderly care facility, there are probably people in there that never did that switch and stayed under the umbrella of parent, school, employer, and never pushed out, never broke out to find out who they were and to take care of themselves. And I know there's people that are old that are still in that box. So that's the cup half full is, aren't we lucky that we went through that transformation? I spent my 20s as a meandering bohemian. I was a contractor and traveling and playing music and writing poetry. I was not in a city in a cubicle. I had freed myself. Now, here the cup half empty, it's actually important to look at, and that is, I had friends at UCLA, that this one friend in particular who had been in the wrong major, and he figured it out in the first 6 months of the first year and he switched. So it is ideal to not have a nervous breakdown. It is ideal to see your needs and to see, oh, this does not serve me. No more of that. This serves me. Ideally, you don't have a nervous breakdown. Ideally, you don't spend 2 years in high school sad and lonely. So it's like, it's great that it happened to us when we were young, but if we were really in tune with our bodies and what we needed, we would have never gotten into that trouble in the first place. And part of it is our ability to direct ourselves, and then part of it is the way society corrals us and the options that are, generally available in pop culture or in the mainstream. So there's ideally, a stitch in time. And that's one of the things with drugs, is drugs allow you, whether it's psych meds or alcohol or caffeine or marijuana, they allow you to stay in that situation that's not feeding your soul by just making you happy anyway. Like, my life sucks, but I'm happy anyway in this moment till it wears off. And that was part of my story. That's part of how I, and possibly, I won't speak for anyone else, that's how I was able to perpetuate and push the change off for 5 years. And I share this just to be real, because I know that kids today, there's a lot of drug use, a lot of anxiety, a lot of depression, and it's like, yeah, that needs to be looked at.
Well,
But
and if they can learn from you and your story about Zephyr, and can listen to their bodies, can understand that this is the only life they're going to have, and that they need to be understanding what they're going to be doing, and making just a little bit of a change will make the difference. As long as that change continues, in your book, you talk about so many different things, and just, I've only seen that sneak preview that you gave me, and you're really talking from your heart, and you're using your own story, but you're also pulling in others. You mentioned your sister in Issaquah, for instance, and how that teaching in that school must give her joy. Well, that makes her healthy. If she was not happy, it would make her sick.
She
She's she's either at ease or she's diseased.
Yeah, and she shares the joy. So she lives the joy. She gives joy to the little kids. The little kids give their love back to her. She makes a video, posts it to the family, and we get to see these cute little South Park kids that are so overdressed for the weather that their arms are sticking out straight. And they're like, Miss Kara, and they're throwing leaves at each other. And that book, Have You Filled a Bucket Today, that she shared with me is perfect, and it encourages people to be nice to others, because when you give love to someone, you instantly receive love. And so yeah, my sister is a great example of somebody whose profession fills her bucket, and it's a very special school that decided to put all the kids outside during COVID. They're like, how do we deal with COVID? Outside, everybody. And they did wear masks outside, which was a little nutty, but they were out romping. Kids would stand there jumping in puddles. Now, most places in America would shut that down right away. Like, hey, you'd be in trouble. You'd be castigated or whatever, ostracized for following your animal nature. Anyway, I love seeing the videos. The kids are just like, just stomping in the puddle with their boots, and yeah. So
Let's stick on the example for just a minute. I hope to live long enough, and I'm now pretty sure I will, to see simple tests that can be done to find out what happens to your brain when you see a video, especially one of someone who you know, or in this case, she took the videos, your sister. Your brain would have those squirts, those neural squirts, that combination. And once the science shows that by having those laughters or those feelings of warmth, that the chemicals that are flowing are uniquely designed to help us get better or worse if it's going to be fear, adrenaline, and cortisol. So once you get that dose and the excitement that you're going to see on the recording of you telling that story of the kids from South Park and they're jumping up and down in puddles, that's the kind of thing that I think will replace many of the medications for people that are just trying to tread water and stay alive while they're not happy. And what you're talking about in the book is find your own way that's a unique prescription for you. And it might be having those thoughts as you write about in the morning, making sure that you're looking forward. And then you've done some really good work on the half full, half empty, that you're in control of which half of that glass you're going to look at and how often you're going to dwell on the empty part. Don't dwell on that. Look at the assets you have and go toward them.
well, and I just had this feeling that we're like sports announcers. Back to you, Bob. Well, and I just have to remind you that the chapter Think Happy is one of 23. There's, in my world, in my creation, there's 22 other things, like go dance, go sing, play some music, have the fattest corpus callosum known to man. But yeah, I think you're right. And so not only are those little squirts of chemical, I'm going to speak for you now, if you don't mind. Not
Sure.
only those little squirts of chemicals will make you happy in the moment, but I'm pretty sure they also give you biological health. That being happy and being at ease and being the opposite of fight or flight, which is, to me, well-being, and I love that term, well-being is deep, that your whole body's at ease. You're going to live longer because you're at a state of grace.
And when you're not only correct, but you've said it in a perfectly scientific way, that when you do get that feeling, and often it's in some studies out of the Netherlands, the two words felt sense are now being explored, that when you feel that, it isn't just, gee, that feels warm, or I get tingles on my arm when I hug my loved ones, or rub a puppy, or if I eat a strawberry. But those chemicals that pop out don't get sucked back in when the hug is over or when the puppy's gone. They stay in the brain for a period of time that we don't know how good that is. But we do know that when someone does something joyful for a period of time, extends the time like you're going to do today with this series of birthday presents to your brain, the chemical change that happens in the brain dissipates over time. But my guess is it'll last for a day or two or three, that you'll keep remembering back on that joke somebody had, or the ping pong game you played. And that's the reminiscence therapy that we're working on. And it's precision applied to you. I
Yeah.
don't play ping pong, but if I did, I would have this chemical knowing that you're going to thoroughly enjoy it. You and your buddies are going to have a flood today that will come back to you later on.
Yeah.
And always be able to go back and relive those by thinking about the glass being half full.
Yeah. Yeah. And the flip side to that is, in my supplementary chapter on parenting, I talk about, from personal experience, the negative impacts of on children of witnessing their parents arguing. And there's that stress chemical, cortisol.
And adrenaline and cortisol, when they mix, it is dangerous. And that's what post-traumatic stress is all about. That it's the stress that the kid will then have over and again. And that doesn't dissipate just because they move out. Someone else gets angry at a grocery store at someone they're not even related to.
Yeah.
But it's that crack of a gun to their brain. And that is, even if it might be a small chemical, that they realize that, okay, I don't have to hear that anymore. It already happened. And that's why having that understanding how the brain works through cognitive therapy, you can understand better what you can do. It's never too early to find that half full analogy, but it's also never too late. You asked me earlier about people in my field of older people, 60, 80, 90. Can they find that half full? Yes, they can. It's harder to get to it than someone like you who found it early. But once the brain changes both functionally and physically through neuroplasticity, it's a matter of sustaining it. You keep that half full mindset, the asset-based mindset.
Yeah, totally. And I just want to go back and underline again that if I had realized at the time that I was parenting the negative impact of the children being in a room with arguing parents, I never would have done it. But I was completely unaware of that. But what I've read since then is that it sits with those chemicals, can be in the child's body for like 2 days, and they affect their ability to concentrate, remember things. It has all these negative impacts in school and all these things. So as a grandparent, I will never argue in front of my grandkids like that. But anyway, sometimes we learn what to do, the right thing to do, because we spent some time doing the wrong thing. And I'm glad it's not always that way. But I'm gonna take a step back even more and
Okay.
go back to what you were talking about, how reminiscence therapy. And I am definitely a veteran of using tools to shift how I feel, because I've been dealing with anxiety and depression for 40 something years. And just getting up out of bed and getting into the day is always the best thing. But after you have your deep breath and you think about the thing that you're excited about, the thing that you love in your day, I think that's a great, and that's like 30 seconds, 60 seconds. Everybody has time for that. But I have spent so much time, hours and days on end, working to shift out of anxiety or shift out of depression. And I have been so impressed with the power of imagining myself, and I'll just sit there, I'll go through the whole process. I'm like, oh, it's snowing. I'm really good at imagining and conjuring this old experience. And it's amazing. I can feel, I've become quite adept at reminiscence therapy, to the point where I can just feel the chemicals flooding my system. Like I just like, okay, the truck is loaded with firewood. It's snowing out. My coffee's done. I've got the rock and roll queued up in the stereo, and the family is all asleep. And
Mhm.
sometimes they're asleep in the car with me. Sometimes they're asleep in the house. But I'm just slowly pulling out down that snowy road with this payload of warmth and love from my grandma. And I get so completely into it. It's like it's happening, and the anxiety goes away. And in that moment, I am just surrounded by that love and those fun, happy chemicals. So I am definitely, a pioneer of reminiscence therapy, and have worked it and worked it. And so yeah, it definitely functions. It works.
The
Um,
science of that, Dave, is just emerging. And it's been around for about 10 years. We discovered it through a Scottish study out of Edinburgh. And we discovered it accidentally. And it was one of the best changes in the direction of the research that I've been doing for older people, because it's a time machine. And the time machine that can take you back to another period of your own life
yeah,
is, it really was unexplored and unknown. And we think of the first time it was actually documented was in the famous counterclockwise study out of Harvard, in which in 1979, they took a half dozen men who were in their 70s and 80s, and they took them on a retreat, a very simple study that was criticized as being too simple, but it was elegantly simple. What they did was to have them carry their own luggage for a weekend that they were spending, or was it 7 days, but it was a short period of time. And they didn't know where they were going or what they were doing, but they took biomarkers ahead of time. When they went to the retreat, they found that everything that they could see, taste, smell, listen to was from 1959, 20 years earlier. They didn't allow them, they could talk about anything they wanted as they socialized, got to know each other, but they couldn't talk about anything that had happened in the last 20 years. They had black and white TVs, that they had TV programs and news from 1959. The newspapers were from 59. The magazines were from,
this doesn't sound very simple to me. This sounds like quite a choreographed event.
and it changed everything, because it not only showed that the biomarkers, after a short period of time, thinking that you're younger, would change, not just physically change their brains, but functionally. And one of the best takeaways was that even though they saw Mickey Mantle on the Wheaties boxes of cereal, and they
Wow.
saw Ultra Cronkite with things from 1959, when they came and when they compared the videos of the men walking up the few stairs at the front of the lodge that they stayed in, they struggled to carry their own luggage. On the way out, they were more upright, every one of them, and they carried their luggage. So physically, they felt younger. We didn't have the machines to image their brains, but I'm sure that their brains would have shown there were physical and functional changes just by mindset, your brain younger. And that's what you can do with when you think about your grandma and the garden and your grandfather. When you really take the time to do it, not just a moment, but when you can augment that with a picture of you at a younger age with your grandma, or if I can smell my mom's cherry pie, a little underbaked, and I can smell the cinnamon, if my eyes are shut when I'm 120 and I can smell that, I'm going to think in a time machine that that's there for us to use and go back in time. And the more stimulations that can be uh, triangulated, so that Dave, when you want to think about your grandma and you find her favorite dish that she made and you replicate that and you smell it and you imagine it, and you can have all five or more of the senses. There are more than five senses. One is a sense of humor. So if your grandpa told a lousy joke to you when you were younger, tell it to yourself and just imagine you laughing as a youngster.
I like it. I like it. Now, I'm going to take that time travel thing and I'm going to say I love that study that in Edinburgh, Scotland, they did a study. I did a study myself, an experiment with myself, 30 years ago, right after I quit smoking marijuana. I was new in this sobriety. I had wanted to buy property for 10 years. I talked with everybody, all my friends. I was constantly scheming and talking. 6 months after I got sober, I bought my first piece of land, 40 acres, all by myself, $2,300 down, $235 a month. And it's funny because it was just east of Macdole. And Macdole is a Scottish name, just like Edinburgh. So I was outside of this Scottish named town doing an experiment with what happens to a human being when you pull them out of society and you put them in a pristine, wild, natural environment where there's no social input, no telephone, no television. And I had a rule that I couldn't even have coffee. I couldn't make coffee out there because that was my one evil vice at the time. So I had a rule. I could show up with a cup of coffee, but I couldn't get up in the morning and make it. So if I spent 3 or 4 days out there, I had no coffee. So I got really, really clear. And what I found, and so what I created was a silent, solitary retreat for myself where I was building a cabin. So I had this activity that I was working on. And I did this over years, and maybe 5 days at a time, 4 days would be the max that I would be there by myself alone. But 2 or 3 days even alone in silence is profound. There was a little cottontail rabbit that would come out from under my deck each morning and sit beside me while I had my breakfast, and I would look over and talk to this young rabbit. And I had incredible mystical experiences. But the best example of time travel-ish sort of thing, removing oneself from society and all of the distractions and the static and the psychic pollution and just all of the strings that are attached, and getting alone and getting clear, the emotions and memories get so strong and so clear that I could be out there like painting my cabin and think of my old friend Paul Wilkin. And it was so powerful. It felt like that person showed up beside me because I could conjure every aspect of who they were. And just it was so rich that it felt like they were actually there with me. And this is getting into kind of like our ability, our telepathic abilities, the abilities to communicate and understand what's happening with each other without technology, because we are the amazing technology. But it was profound how powerful. Another example was my parents came and visited me for a few days, and they went driving off, and I could watch them down the dirt road pulling away, mom and dad in their car. And there I was in the cabin that I had built. And in a busy world, I would already be on the phone. I'd already be on to the next thing, like, oh my gosh, I'm late for my appointment, blah, blah, blah. But because I was east of Macdole in the high desert on my 40 acres, I watched them drive away. And it was the most profound the emotions just welled up. And it was the same emotions that I would have had as a 6-month-old child in the crib watching mom and dad walk away to far away to the kitchen. But it was all there and it was all pure. And this wave of emotions came over me. And then my intellect stepped in and said, who are those people? Where did they come from? And where are they going? And I just,
Wow.
mom, it was beautiful. So this is a plug for getting out of society and and being in silence and solitude, just like Jack Kerouac and Gary Snyder and the Dalai Lama, all these people that have spent large periods of time in solitude. That the reward is you find out just how powerful you are and just how, it's, yeah. So that's the Mac Dole therapy story. We lost our audio. Well, how did that happen?
Okay. Can you hear me?
Yeah. So it went to sleep or something?
No, actually, you touched. I was listening to you. And when you were in that time capsule going back, I imagined how emotional your brain would be right now. You went in an example. I could use that clip. And I started choking up. And I realized that I was going to be emotionally touched by that. And that's the beauty of being able to share things that happened in the past with someone else in the present. So
Yeah.
you weren't imagining it out of thin air, it happened. And
Yeah.
once you can get reminiscence therapy to take you back to where you were, and that's the precision applied part of it. When I presented this at Portland State just before COVID hit, and it was a not ready for prime time, but I was pinch hitting for someone who was ill. They had the event already scheduled for the next week in October, and I had presented there in the past and with updates on neuroscience to this group of alumni and retired professors. When I decided to do precision applied reminiscence therapy, that I got inspired by the Scottish study of taking things that will trigger someone's brain to think about their own life way back when, not just uh, 20 years like in the counterclockwise study out of Harvard, but to go back to young days when someone had something that was an emotional high. And you only have, let's say, a dozen that you can say, these are the high points of my entire life. Those are what need to be dug into. Those are the golden memories, which are gold mines that are covered up with the debris sometimes of decades of life. They're there. And once you start dusting that vein of treasured gold, a memory of some event, what happens is the details come back to you. Now, if you have that machine, the imaging machines, fMRI and MEG scans and PET scans, if you had those a few years from now coordinated, when you went back to watch your parents drive off and you just took a moment to think about them and the love you've got between them, your brain would be so much healthier by doing that on a regular basis. And that's exactly what they did in Scotland. And what they used was magnificent. They used memorabilia from the soccer stadium from the one time in the history of soccer in Scotland that they were world class and beat Brazil. And these men who saw the actual cleats and the balls from the actual games, those men got younger, and that jumped upon to the US, and there's places that use baseball and other reminiscence of the year that this team
Yeah.
energized the entire city. Well, if you precision apply it to someone, you're going to get the things in their life that count. And everybody I work with, especially the oldest of the old, you have to dig with them to find what they will treasure for the rest of their life and bring back those memories and get those cognitive wheels moving again.
Totally. And I'm thinking from a practical standpoint in the busy world,
Yeah.
in Babylon, you could probably spend 5 minutes. You could just pause at that photo in the hallway and slow down, right? Slowing down is the big trick. Relax, slow down, take a breath, slow down. But pause in the hallway at that photograph that takes you back to that place where you had that high, rich,
Yep.
beautiful experience. Take 5 minutes and give yourself that reminiscence therapy. Roger, I'm going to call for a brief interview while I run down the hall, and we're
Okay.
going to let our listeners have a go get you that bag of chips. Go get a
Yes.
picture of someone that you love.
Because when we come back, I'm going to talk to you about how long a person should focus on that photo, the sweet spot of cognitive interventions. How many minutes does it take to really make it effective? Go.
Boom.
Break.
Please enjoy this intermission.
And I'll get some more coffee as well.
Okay. I hope you enjoyed that intermission. I hope it worked out. Wow. That's great. I feel like a new person.
Okay. I don't know what is that, Dave?
Well, it reminds me of my chapter on food. And
Okay.
I proclaim the benefits of my soup and smoothie diet. High nutrient dense foods that are easily assimilable. And many nutritionists, especially the woman that started the GAPS diet, the gut and psychology syndrome, they all talk about how you want to eat foods that are easy to assimilate. So that smoothie is banana, because I'm a fruit sugar nut, banana, apple, blueberries, and then I do like powdered spirulina, powdered turmeric for anti-inflammation. And then I cook up lacinato kale and spinach that's cooked down. And then I add 2 avocados and I make a half a gallon of smoothie. And I have a quart in the morning and a quart at night. And then in the middle of the day, I have a big bowl of soup with meat and vegetables. And having no grain in your diet is amazing anti-inflammatory. So that's another chapter, how food can make you happy.
And it can make you live longer, allow you to extend not just your lifespan, but your health span. And the real tragedy is if someone thinks the goal is to have a long lifespan that doesn't include the health span. So what you're doing is expanding both of them. Well done.
There's a book, I wish I could remember which one, but it over and over again said what we have in America is quantity. What we want is quality. You don't want to just have 10 years of just sitting like a bump on a log in a care facility. You want to be out walking in your 90s, listening to the bird song.
Yeah, and the nightmare is if your body outlives your brain by 20 years, and that may happen in more and more people because the brain isn't able to catch up with the extended lifespan that all of the advances of the last century have happened because brain science is only about 20 years into this new age, this golden age.
Yes.
And things that you can control were unknown in the dark ages of the 1980s and 1990s. They didn't know what worked. They kept looking for that pill, which I don't think we'll ever get here, certainly not in our lifetime. But the difference is that you really don't have to choose everything. You choose one thing. Your choice is pretty easy. You either do something or nothing about your brain's health. And one of the things is to pay attention to that. You said the photograph that you want to stop and buy, or a painting, or a flower. Once you have that attraction and can spend about 2 minutes, 120 seconds, you're into a sweet spot that you allow your brain to focus. You are filtering out what you were in such a hurry to do. You breathe easier, and especially if you're outdoors and you see a tree that is of interest to you and you actually stop. And that's in the field of forest bathing and nature. But if you can spend 120 seconds, that's the amount of time that you just need to take a break. We called them about 15 years ago brain breaks. Take a brain break.
Mhm.
Take a deep breath. It can be for a few moments. It can be for too long. 2 to 5 minutes might be too long for some, but we believe that in a white paper we're working on, that 120 seconds is the brain's sweet spot with some personal changes, a little bit on the low side of that or on the high side. And if you can be attracted to something for that period of time and then go back to the task, then that's to return to task. That's what is called in the literature. You don't just take a brain break and presume that it's going to work magic, but if it's the right type of brain break that recharges and refreshes, then that student, that young teenager you write about that might be so distracted, if you can get them attracted to something that fills their brain so they can't really think of the half empty, and then get them back on task, the studies do show that they are much more productive in encoding, which is learning, and retrieving, which is being able to use what you learn. So that's the magic of knowledge being power.
Hmm. I like how you say attraction rather than distraction, because social media is distraction. It's like
Exactly.
being being but I love that you say like what we have too much of is distraction and what we want is attraction. So for a kid who's stuck in social media world or video game world, the way you can step out of that is to think of, well, what else is there that you would like to do? Maybe you've always wanted to play the flute, but you never have. Or maybe you would always, you would like to ride a bike or make a fort out in the field or in the tree in your backyard. Um, there's a really wonderful website called Healthy Gaming, and it's put together
Okay.
by a young man who had gaming addiction, video game addiction himself, and he offers help for people that are struggling with video addiction. And what
Uh-huh.
he says is, okay, video gaming gives you something. It gives you a social connection. It gives you good chemicals because you get like a happy feeling when you kill that alien or whatever. It gives you camaraderie. So what he says is, how can you get those same hits
Mhm.
in the real world? How can you get those away from your computer? Um, maybe you go volunteer, whatever, you volunteer somewhere. Maybe you help some old lady down the street break the leaves in her front yard and she gives you $5 and you see her the smile on her face. But he encourages you little by little, because you don't want to go cold turkey because it's like stopping smoking or heroin or something. I mean, if you just jerk the video game out from under some kid that's been in their room for 2 or 3 or 5 years doing mostly gaming, it might kill them. I mean, it's like it's heavy. So
Uh-huh.
little by little, replace your distraction with attraction. I like it.
Well, very few people who've really fallen in love with something that they will do for life. They just have this passion to do it. It's not a distraction that's going to be sticking to you. It's something you want to do over and again. And once you get into that zone, that's when the brain chemicals can relax and they flow.
Yeah, absolutely. Guitar at the age of 21, when I went through that big transformation, and I can call it a nervous breakdown. I could also call it the Great Awakening, the the rebirth.
That's
You know,
sure.
my rebirthing into being the boss of myself. I grabbed onto a guitar. I needed to grab onto something. It was critical that I grab something and take it and bring it into my heart, you know. And so playing guitar and singing has been one of those things. And so in my early 20s, I had this black book of the complete Beatles, and I would play front to cover every song, but not all of them because they didn't all work, but half of them. And you know, night before last, I sat in this same spot and opened up a new version of the Beatles complete, and I played some Beatles songs and I sang them, and it still feeds my soul. And I got to tell the story of my son Sam, who got into trouble during COVID because he's a video gamer, and then the school system said stay in your room and look at your computer screen and everything will be fine. Well, that was not the case. And he ended up, you know, having some pretty severe social anxiety, and it was a big deal. It was scary. And I showed up for him because I've got 40 years of experience with that. And one of the things that I said to him is like, Sam, if you can find something that you're passionate about and dive into it, that will be the ladder that you can climb out of where you're at. And you know, there's a little bit of an ego thing for me that I have to feel like I'm the one that gave him the advice. But the truth is, he found the courage as somebody that was having social anxiety. He found the courage when the studio opened up to go to the jiu-jitsu studio. My next interview is with a man named Brian, who is my son's mentor at that jiu-jitsu studio. Talk about getting choked up. That'll knock me on my butt because I watched my son. I watched jiu-jitsu save his life, and it's just so beautiful. So my next interview will be a man talking about how much meaning it has brought to his life to be the guy who showed up for my son.
So that's the ladder. You use that ladder.
Yeah.
The ladder will get you somewhere, but you're the one who has to climb it. And he found that.
Yeah.
So that interview should be an excellent one. Nice.
Yeah. It's awesome. So my son will be doing jujitsu for the rest of his life. He'll probably have his own studio. He's already a great teacher. He's only a year and a half into it. He's a white belt, and he was teaching blue belts, and the guys, the men were like, Sam's great. He's doing a great job of teaching this. So yeah, it's yeah, attraction. You know, when I'm doing my radio show in the morning, I sit there in the KSKQ studio and I look out the window and I can see Siskiyou Boulevard heading north out of Ashland, and I say hi to my friends when I see them drive by. And I sit there at 8 a.m. and I say, good morning, Ashland. Good morning, America. Good morning, planet Earth, because it's all streamed on the internet. And I say, I hope you love where you're going right now. And if you don't, you should probably go somewhere else. I hope you are thrilled about your day. I hope you love your life. If you don't, change it. And that's what I do, sitting there in on my soapbox on the radio in the morning, and I try to play music that's uplifting. And you know, talk about uplifting. I had this experience where I was depressed and I put on Pink Floyd, and Pink Floyd is dark, but it's so beautiful at the same time. And those go together somehow. This darkness, the brightest flower coming from the darkest mud at the bottom of the pond. All of those Jungian concepts are so real. But I put on the Pink Floyd, and I was like, oh God, it was just like, it was like, you're trying to start a campfire, and it's like, well, how about if we pour some of this water on it? It's like, I was like, ugh. Pink Floyd was like putting on like a lead suit, and I like pulled that off, and I popped in the Bob Marley, and it's just like, oh, here we go, let's go. Whoa, man, the power of reggae is it is positive, man, positive, it is positive. So I bet you got something to say about the power of positive music.
Yes,
Yeah.
we've given both events as well as teaching within our cognitive activity design courses at the college, that when music was first really understood, and this would have only been about 25 years ago, it was compiled with the idea it was lightweight until the imaging machines could show what was happening. And when the book called This Is Your Brain on Music was written by Daniel Levitin, and this is way back in 2007, it really broke things open to an explosion in 2014 that included this. When Levitin published a paper that was a speculative paper but built on solid evidence, and was called the neurochemistry, Dave, the neurochemistry of music. And what he theorized that's now being shown to be true is that when you play Bob Marley, there's a rhythm. So think of music as just being organized sound. And organized sound can have effects that are positive, negative, they are soothing, or they are recharging. So it's the rhythm of reggae or drum circles or rhythmic heartbeats. The first rhythm, the first sounds your ears heard were your mother's heartbeat, then your heartbeat. And when you snap your fingers as you're doing that to any rhythmic beat, your body and especially your brain syncs with it. And I always like to say, when we were invented or evolved, we didn't have earlids. You're going to have that sensation that somehow magically gets you tapping your feet. So there is neurochemical magic within what goes into your ears, and you're in control of that. So you take the Pink Floyd off for a while and you put on Bob Marley. And if you were biomarker, David, your brain would be shown to be healthier at the end of that session. What are you going to play for us?
Some Pink Floyd.
Okay.
So, Your Honor, that is what I have to prove the beauty of the darkness of Pink Floyd.
Okay.
Yeah.
David, let's wind up. Why don't you ask me a question that you think would really help your listeners and your viewers?
Okay. I also talk about in the chapter on Think Happy, I talk about the importance of heroes and how my life is a scientific experiment. I am constantly studying and monitoring my reaction and my experience. I was so greatly affected by choosing Aragorn or Strider from The Lord of the Rings as my hero. And it's a beacon. It's a magnet. It's a role model. It's someone to emulate. And the power of that is so profound. And I was reading The Lord of the Rings when I was 13 years old or so. Very, very ripe, very malleable, impressionable age, complex. And it was later in my 20s, I looked in the mirror one night, and who was looking at me?
Okay.
And I say that I always have to have a disclaimer. It's not an ego statement. It's not saying, look how great I am. It's realizing that the master J.R. Tolkien he knew what he was doing. He created these people to carry us through the darkest nights, and we are living those these days. These are scary times. It's crazy what's going on in the world. You have to be the impeccable warrior to be a leader. And anyway, so the power of story to create a hero, to guide a whole generation, to lift up an entire generation or that is so profound. So when my son was listening to gangster rap, I was just thinking, geez, your heroes are murderers. They're drug dealers. They're assassins. That's not so great, Sam. You know, and but he was, if you're a little white boy in a safe community, you're gonna look for something out of your space. You're gonna look to these gangster thugs from Los Angeles and New York. Okay, but heroes are important, and I have a long list of heroes. I'm reading a book about a woman who was a spy during World War II, an American woman. She is superhuman, and she is my newest hero. Who were your heroes? Who inspired you? Just like that thought of the great thing that you're going to do in your day, but it's perennial. They never go away. They're there always in your subconscious. Okay, take it away, Roger.
I think the one hero that I'll always have is William O. Douglas. For multiple reasons. When I was a trial lawyer, I wanted to make sure that I understood him, just like you pointed out that Tolkien wrote this. And you, though, had to spend the time understanding that he chose those words, not accidentally. He chose them to deliver that decades or centuries later. So he's the one that I would pick, and I'll stick with him for reason after reason.
Was he a lawyer?
He was on the Supreme Court. He was from the state of Washington. He was not only outspoken, but he was outside most of his life. And that's one of the things that he brought into the urban court of the Supreme Court. And he was there during the Great Depression into the 50s, 60s. And part of what he did was to take the side of someone who was voiceless and echo what he felt they needed to say. And that's something that I've always embraced. And so when I started working with older people, driving a van 2 days a week, I realized these people were living history, but no one was reading them. So I started opening up the books simply by asking what I've labeled perfect questions. The perfect questions sometimes start with, what's the name of your favorite pet? Their eyes would widen. And now, if I had the machines on them, their brains would come alive when they get to think about. And so every answer is right. If I said, what is the favorite car you've ever ridden in? They would be correct, and I won't know it until I ask them. One of my favorites was part of our memorobics. I invented, who's the favorite person you have ever seen live and in person in your life? And then I give a few clues. Don't say it yet. And you only get one, but what's the favorite that you've seen at a concert? You've seen at a big political rally or a speech somewhere, or you bumped into someone and saw them across an airport. Who's that one person?
Yeah.
So I'll tell you the one that I resonate when one of the 88-year-old people that I'll always admire, when he said, here's my favorite, and stunned everyone. So Dave, who's your favorite person today? May change tomorrow, but of all time, you only get one.
Okay, who I saw in person.
You have to see him in person, not on TV.
I didn't think you were going to ask that, but I'll tell you what. I could have a bunch of answers. I'm going to say it was John Denver.
Excellent. Now stop right there. We don't let the people in the group go beyond who. because it's ready to burst out of days. I got to tell you. So they all go to lunch and dinner and start talking about their lives just because you triggered. It's like putting jumper cables on that brain that saw a famous person. And the one I'll tell you about is someone who was real quiet. He was a very nice guy, but you really couldn't get much out of him. And he just quietly said, Howard Hughes. Boy, I wanted to know about that one. So I cornered him and said, would you tell the whole group next time we meet? He
Yes.
said, I grew up in Long Beach, California, and every day that they were going to get the spruce goose going and supposedly take off, my mom would come grab me and we'd run down to the dockside. And he saw Howard Hughes, but what he saw, David, was just a silhouette. On the one time that he did fly the spruce goose, he saw Howard Hughes in the cockpit flying. And that's a memory. Think of all the chemicals that older man would tell over and again, because once it spread through the little assisted living,
Yeah.
everybody wanted to hear his story.
Love it. That's
So
so
what?
Roger, you're a cosmic pharmacist because you're sitting there in the van and you're like, who would like some good chemicals? Okay, what's your favorite pet? Who's the most impressive person you've seen in your life? And you're just dishing out happiness chemicals. So it's like you are like the cosmic pharmacist. Like,
How about this? I'll be the AAA tow truck that comes along and just use jumper cables to get brains going. Because what I found, Dave, was once you got them started talking about their own life, something that others are interested in, they wanted to dig more in those brain memory banks that they can break into just by telling them that your brain is valued because you are a living history and you have stories to tell.
well, and the cool thing about asking about who is the most impressive, like famous person you've seen, there's a universality to that. Like everyone in the room is likely going to know who that person is, so everyone will feel connected and want to hear the story. And one of my chapters, I recommend that people go out and we make sure that every neighborhood has a fire pit out front of in the neighborhood, so we can get back to the fire and tell stories around the fire, which is designed to do.
Okay. Thank you for having me, Dave. This
Yeah,
has been terrific.
yeah. Thank you so much, ladies and gentlemen. Roger Anunsen, depending on what side of me he's on the screen. The amazing Roger Anunsen. You can see him talk at TED Talks, ANUNSEN, meaning that he is Norwegian, while my name is Swedish. So we were feuding clans across the peninsula with the Norwegian and the Swedish.
Okay, thank you. And let me mention the two TED Talks that I did. The first one, they had some technical problems, but the second one is the one that's more current. And it's the one that is called Applied Brain Science, the Power of a Smidgen, the
Oh,
power of something. It may seem small, but when you take someone's empty shopping cart and they smile at you and say thank you, and you put it in because you're going that direction anyway, any little thing you do, uh, formerly called a random act of kindness. When you wave at someone, Dave, from the radio, that sends a signal to someone that you're bonded with others. Those are the little things that I talk about in the power of a smidgen. So thank you for having me.
thank you for being on the Wake Up Laughing podcast, Roger. We finally did it, and I know we'll do it again because it's too good to not.
And thank you for sharing so much of what you've got to share with others.
Yeah, and don't forget to go to the davidcmunson.com website for more info. Have a beautiful day, Roger.
You too, David. Happy birthday.
Thank you.
Goodbye.
Bye.